Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I want to highlight just how far we've fallen in the UK by going over the various major scandals to hit the news just this week. And we're not even halfway through this week. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, yet again, I'm bringing out a video at the same time as a Prime Minister's questions that could shed even further light onto events. Very fast moving events, could be overtaken, but things are moving so fast that there's really nothing for it. You know, I've sort of said before, I had to explain before, from Monday afternoon and on Tuesday, I don't really get time to catch up and make videos. I try and keep an eye on the news, but I can't make any. So this is really catching up with what's happened since Monday. It shouldn't be that much. But let's start. Let's start with Monday morning. A former minister who happened to be a Muslim woman was sacked from the government a while ago. Now, last week she claimed that the reason she lost her position, or what she was told, was because other Tory MPs, her colleagues who had to work with her, were uncomfortable doing so with a Muslim woman. Strong allegation. And Boris Johnson refused to launch an inquiry when she went to him with the issue at the time. He instead insisted that she make a complaint to the Conservative Party. Went through the party machine. But she insisted, quite rightly, that this wasn't a party issue. She didn't have a beef with the party. This was government business. And I know, Boris Johnson in particular seems to fail to distinguish between the government and the party. But there is a difference. And on Sunday, Johnson sent Raab out to insist that there would be no government inquiry into this matter. He went on to multiple interviews and insisted there's not going to be an inquiry. She should, complain to the party. On Monday morning, the day after, there was going to be a government inquiry. Now, Johnson can't claim that new information came to light. He had the same facts, he had the same allegations on Monday morning as he did the previous morning and indeed the previous year. But all of a sudden, from absolutely no inquiry on Sunday morning to an inquiry on Monday morning, which means the decision must have been made later on Sunday. I mean, another U-turn to add to the pile that speaks of a government in utter chaos. Then we find out that Sue Gray, the investigator into the Downing Street parties, interviewed police officers who'd been stationed outside Number 10. This is when things descended into genuine farce. Instead of the police interviewing civil servants about probable crimes, a civil servant was interviewing police officers about those potential crimes. How backward is that? But that wasn't a scandal in itself. That was just, as I say, farcical. The scandal was actually the next day. The police, so the police for the longest time now have refused to investigate. And because not enough evidence, they say, even though we have absolute proof. And that's not, but the fact that the police weren't investigating this very probable crime isn't a scandal that belongs to this week. But they changed their position. The Met have now announced, it's all over the front pages today, have now announced that they will investigate the parties. Now, that was Tuesday, not Monday, breaking my timeline a bit. I haven't moved on to Tuesday yet. There's still more for Monday. But imagine how this looks to someone who's tried to be charitable towards the government over these parties. Well, yeah, it's not a good look, but he's probably right. It's probably sort of technically within the guidance, work events, that sort of rubbish. The Met Police said there wasn't enough evidence to pursue an investigation. Well, the police said there's not enough evidence, and they're the experts, aren't they? I mean, that's something in itself, isn't it? If you want to study how entire nations are subject to gaslighting, the UK is a great subject. The Metropolitan Police, the most sophisticated police force in the country, says that it is not their job to find evidence of suspected criminal activity. What? Why do we have detectives then? Why do we have detectives? Why are we paying money for detectives if it is not the job of the police to go and find evidence of suspected crimes? That's actually what they're telling us. That's actually what they're telling us. That's not me. That is what they're saying. And the media have allowed them to propagate the message that the police do not go looking for evidence. It has to be presented to them, like by a Miss Marple or something. Even now, they say they won't look for evidence. They will now launch an investigation, but they will not be looking for evidence. They will only act on the evidence that is supplied to them by Sue Gray. Could be a new TV series, Sue Gray Investigates. Boris Johnson has even had to admit that these parties existed and that they broke the rules in Parliament last week. He still denied culpability, but he admitted that they happened. That wasn't enough evidence for the police. The actual Prime Minister admitting that the parties happened, that he was at one, even though he didn't realise it was a party. But Sue Gray's evidence all of a sudden is enough for the Met. Now you imagine someone, and you think, how damning must that evidence be for the police to now be forced to pretend to do their duty? Then, during a parliamentary session in the House of Lords, still Monday, Boris Johnson's anti-fraud minister, Lord Agnew, spectacularly resigned, citing his distress at the fact the government didn't care at all about fraud. I've already talked about the fact the government have wiped out over £4 billion worth of fraud connected with the COVID furlough scheme. And the Treasury, they're just writing it off. It's like, why? It costs next to nothing. Proportionally, it would cost next to nothing to hire a team to follow things up and to claw that money back. No, we're just going to write it off. So Johnson's anti-fraud minister decided that it was impossible for him to do his job when the government are so pro-fraud. The first ministerial resignation since Johnson has been under pressure, and although not an MP, still a significant blow. It was front page news on a couple of newspapers the next day or yesterday, but events overtook it. Otherwise it might have been on all of them. And Monday still wasn't over. It was still Monday. On Monday evening, ITV broke the news that Boris Johnson had attended a lockdown birthday party. There were no denials of it either. And you think to yourself, right, the fact that Boris Johnson isn't even trying to deny it means there's proof. There's pictures, isn't there? There's pictures. And cue social media sharing a letter that Boris Johnson wrote and shared with a 7-year-old who had missed their birthday party due to the first lockdown in 2020. Boris Johnson praised the young girl for sacrificing her party for the public good. I mean, that in isolation, that's a good message. The Prime Minister personally writing to the girl, it was handwritten. I mean, that might have been exciting for her, cheered her up, brilliant. And he was reinforcing an important public message at the same time. Good. But then he later on had his own birthday party. Didn't sacrifice that, did he? A greater contrast between the virtues extolled in this letter and the reality of Boris Johnson you could not make. Granted, it was apparently supposed to be a surprise party. He didn't organise it. I mean, he can't organise anything. Can't even organise brushing his hair. But what the hell was his wife doing, even being allowed to commandeer the Cabinet Office? This wasn't even just a private party in the flat, which still would have been illegal. This was in the Cabinet Office. His wife commandeered the Cabinet Office for an illegal lockdown party. She's not a government employee. She has no business even being in the Cabinet Office, even being in it, much less ordering staff to set it up. You know, and it's an important cog in the government machine, the Cabinet Office. For a birthday bash. Besides, Johnson still attended, and he should have, even if ignorant beforehand, stopped it at the time, said, no, this isn't right. And this was just Monday. On Tuesday, we learn, as well as the fact the Met Police are going to be investigating, that Sue Gray has been given images of some parties, which include Boris Johnson, jammed in with a load of staff and surrounded by wine bottles. Several correspondents are now convinced that these images will eventually become public. Now, I don't know about that, but the contents are said to be deeply damaging. Grant Shapps, the hapless transport minister, was sent to our airwaves to back Johnson in interviews. A classic case of not sending out an idiot to support you. It's not going to go well. He was careless enough to refer to what Johnson had been trying to claim were work events as parties. Oh, he called them parties. Oh no, what happened? I mean, this is how dim many of Johnson's cabinet are. They've tried to fool people by saying, oh, it's work events, yes, or this little bit of it might have looked like it was a social bit, but it was weaved within the work event, which makes it fine, even though it's not a good look. He goes out, calls it a party. So Boris Johnson sends out this dim fixer to deny that there were any parties, and then he starts calling them parties. This was on the same level as Michael Fabricant last week, trying to downplay the level of bullying by the whips by saying that the bullying is actually more widespread than originally reported. Great, thanks for that. Another supporter tried to defend Johnson's birthday party by saying he had been ambushed with cake. Now, I have to say, I think being ambushed by a cake would be deeply embarrassing for most people. It's not really the sort of thing that speaks of a person fit to run a government. The saying, with friends like these, who needs enemies, springs to mind. Then it transpired that yesterday, Johnson's supporters were trying to use the Ukraine situation to keep him safe. Their argument is that, there might be any number of reasons to get rid of Boris Johnson. Yeah, it's all looking quite bad. But you really don't want to change leader at such a critical time, geopolitics and all that. Now, if this argument works, it proves just how dense Tory MPs are. At the weekend, they were all praising Winston Churchill. I think it was the anniversary of something, his birth or death or something, I don't know. Now, what were they praising him for? Was it his early life? No, it's not very laudable. Was it for his first life in government? No, because although he was very popular, he was a bit of a disaster. It's a bit like Boris Johnson himself in some ways. It was for his wartime leadership where he really rose up. That's what won him his plaudits. And why did he become wartime leader? Because at a crucial time of European conflict, the Conservatives ditched their incompetent leader for one who then actually did the job. Now, if Tory MPs have any idea who Churchill actually was, other than that statue that they sometimes look at, then the line, "you don't change your leader at such a moment," should be impossible to make work. Because one of the most famous examples of changing your leader to great success is getting rid of Chamberlain and bringing in Winston Churchill. You know, and maybe supporters think that Johnson can regain his popularity with success over the Russia threat to Ukraine. I mean, we know that conflicts do cause the public to rally around the leader. You know, any number of far-right nutters has stoked wars, in fact, to shore up their popularity. People in this country will talk of Thatcher and the Falklands. She was unpopular at the time. She could have lost the next election. And yes, her popularity increased massively when the Falklands conflict was over, and she won that next election quite handsomely. But she won the Falklands conflict. The popularity of the then Argentine president sank like a stone. So it's not the conflict that boosts your popularity, it's winning. How is Johnson going to win anything with a few hundred troops stationed nowhere near Russia's 100,000? Also, don't they remember the fall of Kabul? In fact, don't they remember Johnson failing every single international test he has ever been set? Like, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the week, or maybe early next week. The Gray report is apparently done. It could even, in theory, be released today, because apparently it is done. So you would certainly expect people to get agitated if it's not published tomorrow. That means it should definitely be out this week, as expected. Will a flood of letters of no confidence go in once MPs have had time to read it? Will they instead point to it as evidence that there is no evidence that Johnson should step down? I don't know. What I do know is that despite the best efforts of his supporters to say that the public don't care about these parties, this is very clearly untrue. You just have to look at what has happened this week. Boris Johnson's unsuitability to govern is never out of the news. Even the news that's trying to back him up. They still have to put it on their front pages, you know, and opposition MPs, I think, would love it if the public weren't that bothered about the parties. I'm quite sure that opposition MPs would much rather haul the government over the coals over their economic failures or COVID failures or even Brexit failures. They probably wish the public were more interested in those things. I certainly do. They are pushing Johnson's probity over these parties because the public are bothered by them. Should they be more bothered by them by some other things? Maybe not, but they are bothered by them. And that's where we are so far this week. Just think, there was a time when you talked about political scandal. You talked about political scandal when I was growing up. And you would think, in the UK, you would think of like the Profumo affair or the Jonathan Aitken trial. Oh, I lived through that. Massive. Sent shockwaves through. Or the Cash for Questions scandal. You know, now we don't just get a major scandal every few years. We don't even get one every year or every month or every week. We can be battered with multiple a day now. Major scandals that only seem smaller than they are because they're crowded out by the one that comes out a couple of hours later. And this is British politics under Boris Johnson. Finally, Dominic Cummings made an interesting point. Despite him failing to give evidence to the Sue Gray inquiry as he promised, he backed out of that one. He did note that civil servants want Johnson gone. They're sick of being humiliated and they're seeing their country humiliated, perhaps, I don't know. But he made the point that they will keep leaking things until he's gone. They won't stop. Because think about just how things have gone. You know, these leaks have happened in the past couple of months. It was all of things that happened a long time ago, a year ago, sometimes nearly 2 years ago in some cases. But it all came flooding out a couple of months ago. What happened a couple of months ago? Oh yeah, Johnson's popularity was tanking because of the corruption scandal. This has come out now because Johnson is vulnerable. It could have come out 6 months ago, a year ago, sometimes a year and a half ago. It didn't. They're targeted to force him out. They waited until he was vulnerable. Cummings is likely right. These scandals won't stop just because Boris Johnson has been so reckless, thrown caution to the wind, that there's plenty of evidence and it will keep emerging. So hey, if Tory MPs want to keep Johnson in place to make Labour look really good to the public, be my guest. But those are my thoughts, no doubt continued tomorrow morning, maybe even several more times, with my review of PMQs at least in the morning, that will be happening at this point in time. Until then, I'll see you later.